I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. So I do have a question from my good friend Pamela, and the question is about Dao De Jing itself. And I felt that the question was timely because as I look at the list of attendees, I see that there are people that I haven't seen in a while, and I see that there are people who are here for the first time. So it's always a good idea to make sure everyone knows the meaning behind the title, Dao De Jing, and also how it splits into two parts. So if you are not aware that Dao De Jing is in fact a combination of two different books, I think this will be very helpful. So to start with, just to make it sort of like an introduction, I'll bring in this web page over here. This is the website, Taoism.net. And what I'm doing is that I am coming to the section, the menu heading, Dao De Jing, and I'm pulling up the web page called about Dao De Jing. So you'll see that there's an image here with the 3 characters of the Dao De Jing. Those are the Chinese characters that are phonetically rendered as Dao De Jing. So this particular title has been translated in many different ways, and most of those ways are subpar. And you probably, if you are new to my talk, you probably did not know that. But I will explain exactly what the title is, and you will see logically, naturally, what the title should really be translated to. So as I mentioned, the Dao De Jing is divided into 2 parts. There are 81 chapters in the Dao De Jing total. Chapters 1 to 37 is the first part. It's called the Dao Jing. So if you were to take 2 out of the 3 characters that you see here, the first one and the last one together, you'd have the name for the first part. And the second part goes from chapter 38 to chapter 81. So the second part is slightly longer than the first part. It's roughly 56%, 54%, 46% split. So the second part is these 2 characters, the last 2 characters together, De Jing. So what are the 2 parts? Well, the first part, Dao Jing, the first character Dao, that's simply character Tao translated into English now as the English word Tao, but the original Chinese meant the way. So if we didn't have that Tao word being an actual English word now, we would have to translate Dao as the way. So Dao, and then the last character Jing. Last character Jing, sometimes mistranslated as the book, as book. It's not book exactly. It's a special kind of book. Jing would be like a classic, a book that's regarded as a classic, a great book, or a sutra. Here, we'll stick with classic. Why can it not just be book? Well, there's a perfectly good Chinese word for book. It is shu, so it's nothing like jing. And when you hear me say jing, you notice that I'm not pronouncing it like Ching, C-H-I-N-G. It's jing like J-I-N-G, regardless of the way it is actually spelled, depending on romanization system, it's always pronounced the same, with the J sound. So J-I-N-G, Jing, is correct. So last character there means classic. So if you were to put the first character together with the last one, you end up with the Tao Classic. That's it. That's the most accurate, the best way to translate the first part of Dao De Jing. So what about the second part, De Jing? The second part, De means virtue. the English word virtue happens to be exactly the same as the Chinese character de, because the Chinese character de has a dual meaning. And the dual meaning encapsulates, one, a human goodness, like, being charitable is a human virtue. So that's a virtue. But it's also, the other meaning is that it's also the inherent power in something. So the English word virtue, we can say, we can talk about that as a human goodness, like being kind. We can also talk about virtue as an inherent power. I can say, by virtue of showing up early, I was able to observe the crew putting together the stage in preparation for the play. So my being able to observe that was by virtue of being there early. Being there early is not necessarily like a human goodness, like kindness, but it's the inherent power of being at a place early that I get to observe the preparation taking place. So I can also say, by virtue of having been educated on classical Chinese, ancient Chinese, I am able to work with the original text directly. And that's a statement that I can make about myself. So by virtue of having that education, that's an opportunity. That's something that I was privileged and honored to receive. It's not a human goodness like compassion. So de can be simply translated very accurately as virtue, because both the English and the Chinese have the same dual meaning. People try to mess around with this and translate de as power. Well, that's one half of it. Or they try to translate it as integrity, also a poor translation. So there's nothing more we need to do than to leave it as virtue, and therefore De Jing is simply the virtue classic. Again, the most accurate and the best way to translate the two. Now, what happens when you combine the two halves together? You get Dao De Jing. Now you know the real translation. The real translation of the Dao De Jing is the Tao and Virtue Classic. That's it. That's all it means. That is the most accurate translation imaginable. Other attempts to make it more convoluted and more complicated, frankly, that springs from a human weakness to make things more complicated than they have to be. Like the book of the way and its power, wrong. Or the book of the Tao and its virtue, wrong. Or the book of the Tao of the way of virtue, again, wrong. So I want to make it very clear here. These are not matters of opinion. These are just people who don't really know the original text and cannot work with it. So now, one level deeper, and then we'll move on. Why is the first part De Jing? Why is the first part called the Tao Classic? Why is the second part called De Jing, the Virtue Classic? So the reason for the first part being the Tao Classic is because it starts out talking about the Tao, and the Tao remains the focus of chapters 1 to 37. So chapter 1 begins with Dao Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, and that says the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. So a well-known line from the Dao De Jing because it's the first line, but it also sets the stage, and it's the reason for which the first half is called Dao Jing, the Tao Classic. So what about the second half? Now, having heard the explanation for the first half, you can probably guess, you can make a very educated guess that the second half probably begins with virtue, right? You would be absolutely correct. So let me show you what the second half looks like. Chapter 38, 38章, it says, it starts with high virtue is not virtuous. Therefore, it has virtue. And these are famous lines from the Dao De Jing as well. 上德不德，是以有德. So as you can see, the second half begins talking about virtue, and that continues on for the rest of the Dao De Jing. So that is the reason. So those are the two halves. Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位点传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.